music show, it stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's gone, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with lies and abusers. We need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.
I know the truth is hard to swallow, just digest it. Suspected something's going on. Chosen, just neglected. Deflected by some breaking news. How we just accepted. Expected just to fall in line and follow their perspective. Don't question their objectives, but I got a lot of questions. How these kids molested, but nobody's been arrested. Read it in the Testament. These children are protected. So I'm fighting all these terrorists, both foreign and domestic.
Folks, welcome to Truth Talk with Steve. Today, I've got a guest I'm really excited to talk to. He's got a couple of books out there and really has some insights on the political environment and kind of, his take on the way things are politically and maybe have been. And so I'm excited to get this perspective. I'd like to welcome to the show today, Michael Anderson. How you doing today, Michael?
Great. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you bet. I appreciate you taking the time and know that you're very busy. So just, quickly, you're a historian, a political analyst. You focus on contemporary American politics and its problems, not that there's many today, apply history and the analysis of political systems from the past to understand the present. You've produced some original research that contributes to understanding the politics today. So tell us a little bit about your background, maybe how you grew up, what your education was, and kind of about your life prior to getting involved in the things you are today.
Okay, I grew up in Toledo, Ohio. I went to Case Western Reserve University undergraduate, and I have a chemical engineer degree. And then I went to graduate school and got a PhD in information science. So I was always sort of on the technical side. And then I started a career in IT. So I've been an IT consultant for like 40 years or something. But 20 years ago, I started writing about history. I've always loved history. Enjoyed, reading stories about all the different historical eras. Human behavior is fascinating. And so one of my common statements when I talk to people about it is that history has already happened and history is stranger than fiction, because you can't write some of the things that happened you couldn't make up and write a book about, as you undoubtedly know.
Right. What's your take on, history? At least when I was still in school, high school, they were still teaching, history. It seems like nowadays that's not really taught that often. But speaking of what we were taught, versus what you found in your research and studies, much of what I learned is actually not very true. Is that kind of the conclusion you've come to as well?
Well, history has always been taught wrong, because the powers that be, whoever they are, I don't know whether it's the educational institutions or whatever, determined that we had to try and cram world history and American history into, I think, 2 one-year courses in high school. And what you end up doing the whole time is memorizing dates and names that don't mean anything. Yeah. And most people find history boring. Most people know very little history. And the reason is because it's taught in a very boring fashion. If you talked about history in terms of telling stories about it, it'd be totally different, because there's so many fascinating events and stories that are out there to learn about.
Well, I can testify to that, because that's exactly my experience. I was bored in school. I couldn't stand classes such as history. But as I've spent the last few years, trying to learn history and truly what our history is, it has been fascinating. So I think that's 100% accurate. I mean, what have you found that is, what's your kind of take on the problems we're facing in America, really around the world, but particularly America? And, what's going on as far as, it's so divisive. It seems like that's intentional. That's my belief. But, kind of what's your take on things?
Well, I think the United States has some uniqueness that makes it different than Western Europe, for example. So we can't talk about the United States and generalize, because the United States is relatively unique. We're a 250-year-old country that started from scratch, basically. Europe has existed as countries for 1,500 or 1,700 years or whatever. And so they have all that legacy period where there were kings and queens and nobility and the common man, basically, with no rights.
Yeah.
So, the United States was one of the first, if not the first, country to use Enlightenment thinking to give power to the individual and create a democracy. So there were basically no democracies between the Greek democracy and the United States, which is about 2,000 years in between.
So when, that's one thing that, frustrates me, is how we, I'm guilty of the same thing, but until I've kind of really dove into things to learn, you hear the quote, politicians who supposedly are, care about the people, which are, in my opinion, very far and few between, but, they talk about this democracy. And, my take is, screw democracy. We're supposed to be a republic. And that is one of the problems that, I see that we face. And we've got to restore our republic. And we've got to, get back to the way this country was founded, instead of all the manipulation and BS that's taken place.
Well, let me talk a little about that, and I'll disagree with you just a little bit.
What we're here to do is just have a conversation, and no problem.
The founders disliked democracy in the Greek example because what the Greeks did is they had voting by the people. So if they would have a meeting of the assembly, then the public would come to it and the public would vote. They didn't have representatives. And so the founders knew that wouldn't work because our country was too vast. They had to build some kind of representative government. And so they took the Greek model and bolted on representation, basically. But they admired the Romans. I mean, they all could read Latin and Greek. I mean, most of them. And they read everything about Rome you could read. And they believed the Republic was the right answer because the Republic was, the Roman Republic was successful for 500 years, and then it fell and became a empire, which lasted another 500 years. So Rome was at the top for 1,000 years, and here we are 250 years old, and the perspective is very different. Right. But let me talk about Republic at the beginning. So, and I don't know how much you know about the Roman Republic. Basically, Rome was a monarchy, and then at one point in 509 BC, the patrician class, which was all the rich people, you probably heard the word patrician, plebeian, that's a high and low class in Rome. The patricians kicked out the king. They overthrew him, and they started the Republic. But the Republic wasn't much of a republic when it started. It was an aristocracy because the patricians controlled everything and the plebeians had no rights.
Gotcha.
Over time, over first 250 years or so of the Republic, the plebeian class agitated for rights, and they were gradually granted by the patricians. And in addition, there was a middle class that developed in Rome called the knights, and that originally came from the fact that people who served in the cavalry in the Roman army were relatively wealthy because you had to buy your own equipment, and the average infantryman couldn't even buy a horse, so you had to have pretty good money to be a knight. And then the knights became the middle class, and they became the entrepreneurs and became rich and competed directly against the patricians. But as I said, after 250 years, the plebeian and the knights class had achieved equal standing with the patricians, so Rome was a balanced republic at that point. So coming back to us, the founders wanted it to be just like Rome. They created a Senate like Rome. They created the House of Representatives is like the Roman Assembly. And Rome had the senior magistrate in Rome was called a consul, consul. They didn't have, you had the word president. And there were two consuls, actually. Two were elected at the same time, and they had veto power over each other, which is kind of strange.
Yeah.
Because depending on the issue, if one vetoed the other, it could never go forward. It could never become law, for example. But they did that because they were worried about a monarchy. They thought maybe if we have one consul, then he might try to take control and take us back to a monarchy. So that was their model. So the founders, it's interesting to read. There's a book by James Madison that basically documents the entire Constitutional Convention. And he had a secretary with him who took notes on the whole thing. And it's very long. It's probably 300 or 400 pages, but they have the events of each day. So it'll say May 28th, 1787. Here was the agenda. Here was what was discussed. And it's fascinating to read about the formation of the government, because regarding the Senate and the House, there was tremendous controversy and argument about it. And basically the arguments were, should the people elect those houses or should the states pick them? And there were people who were more on the Democratic side, like Jefferson. Now Jefferson wasn't there, but people with the same view wanted both houses to be elected by the people. And people on the other side, like Hamilton, who believed in a central government, didn't want either one elected by the people. So the compromise was one gets one and one gets the other. So from the time of the instituting our government until 1910, senators were selected by the states. They were not elected by the people. So that was an amendment in 1910 that granted the people the right to vote for senators. They argued over the presidency. How many presidents should there be? They debated whether there should be two, like Rome. And then they decided there should only be one. They argued over the term, 1 term, 7 years, 4 years, 1 year. What should it be? They decided on 4. And they became less worried about the power of the president because of the checks and balances system. The two things that America did that were trend-setting and unique were, one, the representation thing that I talked about, but second, the checks and balances system, which no other government had at that time. There was a political philosopher named Montesquieu, who was French, and he wrote a book, and he proposed that a checks and balances system could be a good way to control power in government. So we put it in our system so that the judiciary checks the Congress, checks the president, they all check each other.
Yeah.
Now, people can argue that maybe our system has too many protections in it because it's hard to make changes. Like it's very hard to add amendments, very hard. And there's a good argument, I think, that it's too hard to make changes. Washington said when the Constitution was ratified, I hope this lasts for 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, figuring maybe it would have to be rewritten or radically changed or whatever. So that's kind of the history. So, and also to talk about what makes it a republic, in Rome, in order to vote, you had to own property. And when the United States began, in order to vote, you had to own property, just like the republic. So men who didn't have property couldn't vote. Women couldn't vote, of course, and minorities could not vote. So it was a very specific right to vote based on property qualification. Now that all gradually went away, and by about 1850, most states allowed all men to vote. But of course, women didn't get to vote till 1920.
Right.
So not much of a democracy if only a small percentage of the people can vote, right?
Right.
So another reason why we were more of a republic than a democracy. The founders called our government a republic of republics, because theoretically the states are republics too.
Right. Yeah.
And there was a lot of fighting in the Constitutional Convention about the power of the states versus the power of the federal government. Once again, a compromise was reached there, where states got rights the federal government didn't have, and the federal government got rights the states didn't have.
Yeah.
But they didn't really overlap. And then the other great compromise that's important to talk about is the slavery compromise. I don't know if you're aware of this, the Constitution talks about slavery, and there's two things in there about it: that slavery must end, import of slaveries must end I believe it was 1818. So they put a limit on how long slaves could be imported. Obviously, the North felt like there shouldn't be slaves at all, but the South was so needed slavery so much for their economy. They were so dependent on slavery. Those are the workers of the economy.
Yeah.
So if they were all freed, that would have been the end of their economy. So,
Right.
I mean, partially bigotry, but partially, economic. So if the compromises hadn't been made, there would have been no constitution, because the southern states would not have supported it. So the North knew they had to compromise in order to move forward.
Right.
So republic then gradually went more toward a democracy since, because everybody can vote and the senators get voted on by the people. So it's more of a democracy. I'm writing my 5th book now, which is going to come out sometime next year. And it's funny that you asked that question, because the title of the book is America's Counterfeit Democracy.
Oh,
So
wow.
basically the book's about the fact that it isn't a democracy anyway.
Yeah.
So,
That's fascinating. Wow. Yeah. And, and I find, if I'm being, one thing I try to be is transparent and vulnerable. I'm not incredibly well read. And part of the reason I, state things like that is because I hear it so much by people that I sense are just regurgitating things that they're not that,
Right.
they haven't really done enough research on. So I really appreciate that perspective and that detail that you gave. And
Well,
that's great.
There's so many terms in politics that are confusing and overlap or have multiple definitions. Like, for example, liberals. Okay. When the Enlightenment occurred, there was something called classic liberalism created. It didn't get the word classic added to it, but it was called liberalism, which was government by the people, basically. In the Depression era, Roosevelt's form, the New Deal of government, was labeled New Deal liberalism, because it was nothing like the original version, because it was big government, basically the welfare state.
Yeah.
And then we have a term you might read called neoliberalism, which is trying to go back to the original liberalism from the Enlightenment, with an emphasis on capitalism. So neoliberalism is a focus on capitalism running a society. And then you've heard the term libertarianism, which is that's like a sect of liberalism where, there's a lot of libertarians around. Libertarians believe in basic government with no frills, no foreign policy, for example. And it's pretty similar to the original liberalism of the Enlightenment. So all these terms fly around and people don't understand the differences between them, and they confuse them, and that makes it complicated.
Right. That's for sure. Yeah. So you've got 4 books out currently.
Yep.
I'll have all this in the notes. We can talk a little bit about it further at the end here of the interview. But what was your first book?
My first book was called The Progressive Gene, and let me tell you where the title comes from, because that title goes through all my books.
Okay.
I started out wondering why the left and right are different, because they're very different, and it's genetic, partly genetic. They're born that way, and they're not going to see eye to eye. They can't, because they're different. And so I was trying to add, why do they fight all the time? What is it? Why is there no compromise and all that stuff? And I read a book in 2012 by a social psychologist named Jonathan Haidt. His book is called The Righteous Mind, and he basically was the first one to lay out morality differences between the right and left. And so I've included that discussion in all my books. The Progressive Gene seeks to explain why progressives are progressives. So that's where the title comes from. And just speaking in general terms, if you compare the right and the left is very dedicated to equality. They feel that capitalism is evil, and the hierarchy of government is unfair, and we need to have some kind of system that's equal. The left of the left are where the socialists sit, because that's the most extreme form of being on the left, where you want to exchange the government, get rid of our capitalism, put it in a socialist state. Yep. So the left is very, biologically drawn to equality. The right is not like that. People on the right believe that a hierarchy is the right way for human society to operate. I mean, there are smart people on the top and there are less smart people on the bottom, and people should have the right to accomplish what they're going to accomplish with their life if they want to invest the time and energy to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. So people on the right don't like the notion of equality for that reason. Plus, they don't think it's possible to achieve it. Putting in a government that's going to pay everybody all the same wage, for example, is really impossible. I've written articles about it and all that. It's too idealistic. Yeah. And the socialist thinking goes back to the early 1800s, and it's involved many iterations and dialects. People set up utopian states where there are towns that were equal, everybody was the same, and there was no government, and they all failed because people, I mean, if you put a group of people together of any size, 50 people probably or more, they're going to divide themselves out in a hierarchy, because some people are going to take charge and other people actually don't mind being bossed around. Yeah. They don't want to be in charge. That's right. I mean, it's very, very common. Yeah. So that's basically the difference between right and left. Now, the other thing about, I talk about equality on the left. On the right, conservatives believe in loyalty. They're very loyal. They believe in authority, as I said. So they believe to respect authority. They're patriotic, and they believe in traditions. So, they like the status quo, whereas the left likes change. And these are both these characteristics of change and status quo go back to primitive times before humans were humans, when different behaviors developed in humans' predecessors to adapt to the environment. Because when you probably know the story of man migrated, or primitive humans migrated out of Africa. First ones are in Africa, and then they migrated throughout the world. And when they got to different climates, they didn't know how to adjust to those climates, because obviously, like, Europe is colder than Africa. Yeah. Makes sense, right? So evolution developed an adaptation into different types. One type liked what is new and like change. Another type like the status quo and traditions. And those are the basis for the behaviors of left and right that we see today.
Interesting.
Now, politics, and I didn't really know this till I started reading about it. Politics didn't exist till basically 1850. I mean, because before the Enlightenment, people had no rights anyway, and they didn't vote. So it didn't matter. I mean, how could you be political?
Right.
But once the Enlightenment happened and factions developed, like in Britain, the conservative, the Tory faction, and the liberal faction started opposing each other, and people got the right to vote, they started voting for one of the other, depending on whose platform they liked the best.
Yeah.
So conservatives voted for conservatives and liberals for liberals. And then the candidates they realized that, well, if I put together a platform that appeals to this group, that increases the likelihood I'll be elected. So that's how political parties got started, and they exist today.
Yeah.
Are you tired of paying exorbitant monthly fees for your in-home entertainment? Do you wish there was a way to bring quality and affordable entertainment right into your household without a monthly subscription? Well, look no further. Introducing the VC Box Android TV Stream Box. Since 2020, VC Box has been enriching people's lives all over the world, and now it's coming to North America. Say goodbye to scattered subscriptions and countless apps. We've got all your streaming in one place. This is the best fully loaded Android TV box provider in North America. Our user-friendly interface makes navigation a breeze, and with the voice remote featuring Google Assistant, finding your entertainment has never been easier. The VC Box V2 Pro Android box is the epitome of convenience. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your favorite shows and movies with just a few simple voice commands. And the best part, no monthly subscriptions. That's right, you heard it correctly. Say goodbye to those pesky recurring fees and hello to endless entertainment. Join the VC Box revolution and elevate your entertainment experience. Don't miss out on this amazing opportunity. Visit our website and order your VC Box now. Bring home the VC Box today and bring endless joy and excitement to your household. VC Box, unleash the power of entertainment.
So, with that, it seems like, as we've watched things, particularly the last decade or two, it seems like there used to be at least some willingness to try to work together across the aisle. It seems like that's just totally gone. To me, it seems like, frankly, the last several years, maybe 7, 8, 9, I don't know. It almost seems like they don't give a damn to try to make anything really improve. It's almost like it's a uniparty working together is the way I really see things. I mean, how do we get back to true American values and, getting people that'll get this country back on the right track? I mean, it's easy. It's a hell of a lot easier said than done, certainly, but
yep.
I just don't see anything positive coming with the way things are going right now.
There's two ways to answer your question. You talked about the government, and the government in the mid to late 90s became tribal. Now, you have to understand the government reflects the people. So if the government's the government's tribal, the people are tribal ahead of that. But there used to be moderates in Congress who were arbiters between the left and right and helped get things done. Yeah. All those people are gone. They retired. So all you have is the ideologues left on left and right, and they obviously don't agree on anything. But the overriding societal factor that has impacted us is tribalism. And tribalism came from everything being politicized. I mean, usually, when I was a kid, the only thing was political was the political parties. Yeah. And what they stood for. Now everything is political. Everything. And social media is, to me, an awful thing because it's given the voice to everybody crazy in the world. You post something on there that doesn't make any sense. You don't have to tell the truth. There's no truth verification. And ironically, the wilder your statements, the more eyeballs you'll get, right? Because it attracts people.
Yeah.
the social media companies love that because they get more readers with the wildest stuff, but it's bad for the country because it's inundates us 24 hours a day with misinformation, bad information, and people are evil. There are evil people on there.
Oh, absolutely.
So this
distracting. It's ruined. I mean, it's ruined society in so many ways.
Yeah, right. So everything becoming political has forced, I don't know if forced is the right word, caused people on the right and left to gravitate to a tribe. Because if you gravitate to your tribe, you feel safe there because those people share your views.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, if you're lazy and don't want to think about the reasons for things, tribalism is a good thing for you because you don't have to worry about what you think. You can just think what your tribe does. And that's not a good thing.
Huge problem. Yep.
Right. Because people need to think about what's right and wrong about tribalism and try to fix it.
Yeah.
People need to be willing to talk to each other, even though they have different views, and understand each other. I mean, I was on a podcast yesterday. I was talking about how families don't go to Thanksgiving anymore because one's on the left, one's on the right, and they stay home. That's crazy.
It's sick. It's sick.
Family should be above politics.
It should be above everything. Yeah, 100%.
So
it is. It's sad, and yeah. I mean, those dang smartphones are. I mean, they are. There's a lot of evil involved in what they do. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and how do you put Pandora back?
Exactly. I'm so.
How do you take those cell phones away from 13-year-olds who watch TikTok all day?
Yep. Exactly.
Problem.
Yep. I mean, I'm even guilty at times. I notice I'm texting somebody while I'm freaking walking. It's like, it's so distracting. You do things that, that I don't agree with, and I catch myself doing them,
Right.
It's just, it's terrible. But so, I mean, what can we do to, try to get things going in the right direction? We've got, like you say, we've got to be able to, that's the thing that frustrates me the most is, like, if I have an opinion on something, and whether it's you or anybody else, if you've got information that, could give me insights to show my opinion is off or even wrong, I want to hear it. Right. Absolutely. I mean, I've had several episodes on this podcast where that's happened. And I'm going to be the first to admit it. I got no problem with that.
Right.
Hopefully,
unfortunately, most people aren't like you.
I know, and half
the people aren't like you. I don't know.
Right, and that's what's frustrating because, like you said, how crazy is it that worst case, we should be able to agree to disagree without having, getting all defensive and raising voices, and but unfortunately, it's just not that way. But somehow we've got to bring that back, otherwise, we're really screwed.
Right. Well, and the elections are so bad now because instead of voting for one party or another based on the candidate and the platform, now you just vote for your tribe.
Yeah.
You don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, 24 is looking like a disaster to me because in my personal opinion, we have two candidates, neither of which should be running. And so, but the American people don't have any control over that because one's the incumbent and the other one has a very large block of loyal voters.
Right.
So we can't do anything about it. Unfortunately, we have to wait till 2028 to clear the field and start over. It looks like.
My take. I'll be shocked if we have a 24. That's my opinion, but we'll see. There's too much stuff going on behind the scenes. I mean, it's pretty clear if people do their research that we're operating in a cog right now. I mean, there's tons of proof about that. And
so back to your question. Back to your question, my tribalism book, which is book 2, I think I said there are 3 ways to fix this, which is your question. Huh?
Oh no. Okay. What's the title of book 2?
Tribalism, and I can email you my website.
I've got your website. And I'll have that in the show notes too. So I'll just pull it off of there.
Tribalism, the Curse of 21st Century America is book 2.
Well, there it is right there on your website then. Okay.
So I conjecture three possible ways to end tribalism. The first one is, and I don't want this to happen, but America uniting together over some external threat. Let's say there was another 9/11 or something.
There you go.
And we don't hope that happens, but that there needs to be a way for the country to come together over a single purpose.
I totally
Now,
agree.
COVID should have been that, but COVID got sucked into tribalism.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that the CDC was advising people based on a political point of view instead of objective medical opinion is awful.
I'll say.
So, because that was the perfect thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so external threat is one. The second is we've talked about getting people to talk, getting people in dialogue. Now, my opinion, the secret weapon in the dialogue thing is the traditional Democrats. And the reason I say that is because Biden signed a devil's pact with the progressives to get him elected. And we've all known him as a 40-year moderate. Now, all of a sudden, he's way on the left. He's so far on the left that Clinton's a Republican now, basically.
Yeah.
But the secret weapon is a very large part of the left is the traditional Democrats. And when you poll them, they're open to compromising with the right, and they reject the socialist efforts of the extreme left. But for some reason, they're a silent majority. I mean, they've been cowed by the progressives, and you really never hear anything from them. Now, Bill Maher's a great example of a traditional Democrat. And he rails against the progressives as crazy and all that stuff. And I mean, there need to be more people broadcasting like him or thinking like him, because if the traditional Democrats knew that they could fix this problem, maybe they would try harder.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So number three then is everybody gets tired of this and it fades away, which is possible. Because when you think of, I use the Thanksgiving example. When you think about how important beating each other is every day, beating up other people every day and ridiculing them and calling them out for stuff that doesn't even matter, compared to trying to live in our society and promote a government that does things for the people and moves forward. I mean, they don't do anything. They don't do anything basically because they're tribal and because of the lobbyists, because the lobbyists have control of the Congress. So they do the lobbyist platform instead of ours.
It's true. No doubt about it. Interesting. Yeah, it's I think that tribalism, like you said, that is the number one issue. And, we've got to somehow break from that. But like you say, it's so easy. Now, I think I used to be one of those people that was basically just ignorant and went along with my tribe,
Right.
As I started to see things that didn't add up and didn't seem to be right, it got my attention. And so I decided, wait a minute, I can't just ignore this stuff. I used to have the belief that, and I believe there's a lot of truth to this, that we personally can create the lives that we choose. I believe in that big time. And so I used to always say too, that really doesn't matter, what's going on. Doesn't matter who's in the White House, doesn't matter any of that stuff. But it does, I mean, it does. And we can't have that attitude. I mean, and I was one of the people that didn't vote forever. Most of my life I didn't vote, but that's not the way we can do it if we expect to have different outcomes and to keep, if we, the people, want to be, have the freedoms and the things that this country was founded on, then we need to be involved, or we're going to run into the BS that's taken place. And then we have to look in the mirror and bitch at ourselves,
Yep.
And it's going to take us to get involved to fix the problems, I believe.
Now let me talk about, there have been two cases in history, in American history, of tribalism.
Okay.
So we can get a perspective based on that. They're not like this, so the solution probably isn't the same. Who knows? Obviously, number one was the Civil War.
Yep.
And a war was fought over slavery, and it has to be considered the greatest tribalism that we can possibly have, because 600,000 men got killed fighting each other over slavery.
Crazy.
So, and I mean, the Union won the war because, for economic reasons, they starved and exhausted the Confederacy till they had to quit. But the second case occurred during the Gilded Age, basically after the Civil War, when, I don't know how much you know about this, but after the Civil War, democracy came back together because the North united with the South, and people were all enthusiastic and excited about voting. So the number of people that voted went up enormously after the Civil War. But what happened, what that generated was something we didn't want, because then the political parties developed bossism. And I don't know how much you know about that, but political parties became machines, where in every city there was a machine, and there was somebody that ran each party, and they were in charge of sending people to the polls to beat up people or bribe them, because voting was not secret. You fill out your ballot and handed it to somebody, and they got to look at it, or they gave you a ballot to hand in for them, basically. So, and then people were rewarded. You could get, here's money for a couple drinks at the bar. Let's go to the bar after you vote, whatever. Vote this way, and you'll get a fifth of liquor or something like that. So, the other thing was the people that were elected to Congress, there was a spoil system. So if you got elected, all your friends and relatives could serve in the federal government because they were working for you. So you got to name the postmaster for the cities in your state, for example, if you were a senator. So it was a combination of the corruption and the voting machines that produced corrupt government. And then the progressive era started, and there was already a backlash against the Industrial Revolution because of the exploitation of workers. Workers were underpaid, worked long hours. You probably know that story. Yep. So there was very strong interest in cleaning all that up. And so some laws were passed, but the strategy for doing the elections was changed. For example, the secret ballot was added. And once the secret ballot was added, you could imagine how that had an impact, because, people could still stand outside and try to influence your vote, but they couldn't see how you voted. Yeah. So you could say, oh, I'll vote for you, and then vote the opposite way. Yeah. So that was very important. And then, political societies and educational institutions sort of intellectualizing politics to make people understand how politics really worked and what the government was supposed to do and all that. And they sort of raised politics to a middle class, and the middle class grew tremendously during that period also. So the quality of the voting was better. So tribalism was overcome by changing the system in that case. Unlikely that we can do that here. We have to do something else. Yeah, it'd be a tough one here. Interesting. So what do you see as the future? Where we're at right now? Well, one of the things I talk about in my fifth book is the reason we're not a democracy is because the corporations and the wealthy control the American society. And that's, a lot of people believe that. There's very strong data that shows it, and I don't know if you know much of this data, but I think the
Act of 1870.
Top 100 families control 40% of the wealth in our country. That's 100 families.
Oh yeah.
The
I'm
top
surprised not less
1%
families and more percentage.
right. The top 1% of incomes control like 65%.
Yeah.
So, and the bottom 50% control 2% or 5%, whatever it is.
Oh yeah.
So there is a system in place. Well, let me backtrack from there. In every society since governments formed, the wealthy exerted most of the control over that society. Because if you were rich and you owned land, you could hire people, you could grow crops and make yourself wealthy. More land, more wealth.
Yep.
And so wealthy people have influenced government from the beginning. I talked about the patricians in Rome. They controlled everything. They controlled all the government positions, all the laws that were passed and everything. Same in the US today, because there's a coalition between the wealthy people, the wealthy families, and corporations to influence how government operates. And the lobbyists are in the middle of that. So what we see is, and the platforms and the influence how the candidates are selected. I mean, the whole thing about, Bernie Sanders in 2016, the wealthy didn't want him running too extreme. They wanted somebody who could compete better. So they made sure that Hillary was nominated. They rigged the system, basically.
Yep. So,
and I don't think there's anything we can do about the influence of the wealthy. In a certain sense, it works because there are people on the right and people on the left that are wealthy.
Oh yeah.
So basically, and there's a term for it called the political elite, and those are rich people that get involved in politics because they want to influence the government. There's a book written in 1957 called The Power Elite that is a very famous, written by a sociologist. But what's good for us is the fact that there are Republicans and Democrats in the power elite, so neither one of them has control. And they fight for winning elections against each other. I mean, thank God that there isn't only Democrats in that in the power elite, that there's both parties, because that kind of even things out. The unfortunate thing about it is one of the strategies of the power elite is to make the American people think that they are representing us when they really don't.
Bingo. That's right.
So there's a tremendous amount of public opinion, articles written, books written that pretend that they're out there helping us when they really aren't. I mean, but all of us can see that. I mean, we see that every day. We see how few bills come out of the Congress. We see, during the Great Recession, who gets bailed out first? The big finance companies. And the people go bankrupt because it's who has the power and the position and the wealth influences the government the most.
And the interest behind it to get more power and more wealth. It's just.
And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not making that up. There's plenty of evidence that I'd be happy to share. There are books written that talk about that.
Absolutely, 100%. That's the thing. Us people who talk like that are called conspiracy theorists. There's been way too much stuff that's finally come to light that you can actually find documentation on to prove it, like you said.
I was going to say this is not like the Kennedy conspiracy, but the Kennedy conspiracy is a conspiracy. It's gone from urban legend to truth now. I don't know if you know all the new information coming out and stuff about it, which is
quite a bit of it.
I scratch my head thinking about how that was suppressed. I mean,
Crazy.
They think the CIA killed him, basically. And there's a lot of information about that. They did not like the direction he was going with Cuba, etc. But that is passing beyond conspiracy theory into reality as we speak. So
exactly. He was pushing against the big machine.
Yep.
And so was Reagan.
Right.
So what happens when the people, very few that we've had, something seems to happen. And then, after Reagan ends up living, he seemed to lose a lot of control for some reason. Things changed quite a bit from the way it seemed with him. But anyway,
I mean,
it's fascinating,
But the Trump phenomena is interesting because, Trump has this large body of loyalist voters who love him and will not listen to anything said against him. But the reason that group exists is because these are basically middle-class, non-union white men, the majority of them, but they have women and other groups too. That is a group that the Democratic Party dumped. They used to be Democrats, but they were marooned by the Democrats so that the Democrats could be more involved in high finance in Silicon Valley. And so they were left on their own, and Trump came along and acted as their champion. So they have Trump or they have nobody, which is why they stick with Trump. And Trump is what you call a populist candidate and a populist president, which has never happened before. In other words, a person that communicates directly to the people over everybody else and talks about representing them. And I agree that part of him wants to do that. He is a populist. It's just you get so much baggage along with it. That's where the problem lies.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. That's for sure over the next year or so. Because it's I don't know which way it's going to go, obviously, but something's got to give. And I think, like you said, we truly do. I mean, I see it. To me, this isn't a political situation. I believe it's a biblical situation. I believe it's a spiritual war that's taking place.
Right.
And like you said, in order for us to unite as a people, to understand that how silly we are being and stupid, we have so much more alike than we, don't have alike. And we do need one of those events, like you said, to unite us. And what that might be, I have no idea, but I do believe I'll be shocked if something like that doesn't happen. Whether it's, some BS false flag or if it's a God moment,
Right. Well, it's interesting you brought up religion because that's a huge bone of contention.
Me, it's more spirituality. I'm not a religious guy.
Right.
Even though I grew up in religion for 45 years.
No. But my point is that religion is under attack because the left believes that if you're religious, you're stupid.
Yeah.
Because if you don't believe in evolution, for example, or new ideas like trans or something like that, you're stupid. And so they don't understand the depth of the spirituality of religious people.
Yeah.
They live by their religion. And
true.
For most of the history of our country, that was okay. If I was Catholic and you were Protestant or something, so what? We went to different churches, but we could talk, right?
Yeah.
Now you can't even talk.
Yeah, it's nuts. Truly is nuts. Wow. So your fifth book comes out next year?
Yeah, I hope by summer or late summer. It's about half done. So
that's great. Well, man, you have a wealth of knowledge and insight and everything. It sounds like history wise, it's those are the kind of conversations I really enjoy because my focus is to expose things to people, give people different perspectives, but to learn along the way. I feel like if we're not open to continually learning and seeking other perspectives, then we're damn near just dying, really. I mean, we got to just keep on moving forward. There's too many know-it-alls that think they know everything, and those are typically the people who don't know hardly anything.
Or liars. Liars trying to push people a certain direction.
Yeah.
And let me make a comment about that. I was academically trained. Obviously, I have a PhD.
Right.
And part of academic training is to always find the truth.
Yeah.
So if you're going to write, when I write my books, they're not biased. They're not one-sided. They attempt to tell the truth because that's my responsibility as an academic.
Yeah.
And so I'm used to that. But in the past 10 or 20 years, the sources of truth have dried up.
Yeah.
And I mean, I talk to my kids are in their early 30s, and they say, I don't know, how do I find the truth?
Yeah.
And the only way to find it is you have to discover it by reading multiple sources or developing a relationship with a source that allows you to understand whether it's truthful or not. If it's not, get rid of it, get something else.
Yeah.
But I mean, I belong to I subscribe to a socialist magazine because I want to see how they think our country would run if they're running it, and what they see is wrong with the country. Because if I'm only reading stuff that the conservatives say, that's wrong. That's
totally agree. Yeah.
right, and you end up with a biased view because
Yes.
you didn't read both sides.
Yeah. And it's so hard too to know that, like you say it, you have to find the truth from those true sources, which has become so difficult. So then it's like you say, it's almost like you have to have that discernment, really hone in and work, which is what I've really been trying to do. And sometimes it's very frustrating, but we have to have that source of, even some people just call that gut feeling. I mean, I do a lot of my business on who I bring on sales wise and not based on my gut,
Right.
after having a conversation with them, not even about business, just about who they are. And, I found that that's been the best way for me to kind of decipher truths when I've really struggled to find it. Because, we know stuff's suppressed depending, there's narratives out there, and some people think that's all conspiratorial, but it's pretty easy to see if you are willing to open up and look, when you can't talk about certain topics or specific words on YouTube or you get canceled. That's a problem to me. We should be able to speak, even if, our truth is wrong, should still have that freedom of speech, and we don't. And it's tough. And so
where are you on the political spectrum, if I may ask?
I'm just center right.
Okay.
I think I'm not, right now, I'm still a Trump supporter. I don't think he's a savior or anything like that. I think that's where some people go wrong.
Right.
Like you say, that tribalism's so strong there that I don't do that. But,
reason I asked you the question is I was describing before the difference between right and left.
Yeah.
And one of the differences is liberals like to analyze things and make decisions between alternatives. Conservatives operate with their gut.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big difference.
For sure.
Because conservatives conservatives are more intuitive, and they come to the decision they feel comfortable with much easier than the left does. And it's just different between people.
Yeah. I'd say I've tried to, over the past couple of years, I think I've tried to, I've been the kind of guy that I'd never really enjoyed, learning's the wrong word, because obviously I enjoy it depending on the topics, but studying, I guess, really, and spending time, because in school when I was growing up, I was just bored for whatever reasons. It's not because I had a high IQ and so it was boring. I'm not that kind of a person, but I've really tried to look at other sides. Like I have a couple of relatives who are so far to the left, that there has been difficulties in conversations. And I've tried to just pull back and not engage in that, but still try to listen, because like you, I want to find the other perspective, because man, I want to know if I'm off. Right.
Yeah.
And so I hope to always be that way. But yeah, I definitely, because I think I have such a negative take right now, at least on the media and what's put out and what you could Google and find, I don't really trust much of that. And so that's where I think I've really gone to rely on my gut so much. And it's not always right. I've found that out, And
let me talk about something very important then, because
yeah, please do.
My fourth book basically it's called Twilight of the American Experiment. Without moral balance, our republic will fall. What I mean by that is that the left dominates all the communication systems in our society right now. Yep. They dominate higher ed. All the professors are progressives. Yep. conservative can't go speak on a college campus without being attacked.
It's crazy.
They control the traditional media and they control social media. So they have about 90% of the airwaves locked, and the conservatives don't have the same voice. Yeah. And so my book talks about that, about the need to correct that and get the balance between the morality that comes over the airwaves more balanced than it is, because it's all to the left.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Which allows them to create narratives that influence the people that aren't willing to dig in and try to learn like us and use that critical thinking that's so important.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
And that's where that tribalism can win out big time, just by creating a narrative. So,
right.
That's what I really respect about you, as we've talked, is, I can sense that there's definitely a few things we might have differences on, but you definitely are doing everything in your power to put out what's true, fair, lack of a better way to put it, fair and balanced,
Right.
And there is no agenda at all. You're just speaking based on, what you're able to learn and uncover and what history's shown as well. So I really respect that and think that, you're the perfect person that we need to follow, and have that type of perspective and challenge our beliefs. I think that's one thing that's huge. I mentioned I grew up in the Mormon church my whole life. I was born into it.
Right.
And I'm lived right in Utah County, Provo, Utah was where I grew up. And, coming to realizations about some things there and then talking about it, that's not an easy thing to do.
Right.
Without getting some major pushback.
Mm-hmm.
But as I saw some things, even though I've been taught not to challenge, not even to look at anything that's not approved by the brethren, because then it's anti-Mormon. But the internet's made it so that they couldn't hide a lot of these things that have frankly been covered up for so long.
Yep.
And I just decided one day that this is going to be difficult. I could be wrong, but I'm going to challenge the belief system I have, because that only came from the experience I had, the people I've been around, and what, the influence I had. So that's where we get our beliefs. And so to me, beliefs aren't, really right or wrong. They're just beliefs.
Yeah.
What we have to do is challenge them and be willing to look at them, ask the tough questions, to come to conclusions on our own. And that's not easy.
Well, we talked about people following their tribes. I respect what you have done, because there are religious people who just go with the program. They don't question the program. And then there are people like you who do, and I'm not saying anyone is right and anyone is wrong.
Right.
Different strokes for different folks, but you saw the difference between yourself and others that were blindly accepting something that you couldn't. So that I'm sure changed your life view.
Oh, it did. And it frankly, it was so freeing, on top of it. But it's interesting because, we had my father-in-law had a 90th birthday this past Saturday. And there's one cousin of my wife's who has made a couple comments on some Facebook posts I made, like he's concerned about me, kind of a thing. And that's the typical reaction to the Mormon when somebody, leaves. They think that, I've lost my way. And,
right.
And, my wife's chatting with him. And of course he brought it up to her. And, she just said, hey, I trust my husband. But I also admit he's going to be who he is. I'm not going to change him or judge, him or anyone else. I mean, easier said than done for most of us as humans, but the first person we should be judging is ourselves and being true to ourselves. And like you say, man, it hasn't been easy. And there's a few people that really think I'm just whacked and lost my way. And, and it's sad as hell to me, because I'm 99.99% I'm right.
Those are the people that are stuck, though.
Absolutely.
Because if they don't understand the enlightenment that you achieved, then I don't know, then that's too bad for them, I guess.
Yeah. It's really sad, because it frankly is a cult, and they're, too many of them, they're just checking boxes that they've been taught that you do to be that good person that's going to go to the celestial kingdom, and that's it. And it's just It is. It saddens me, frankly. But that's why I'm willing to speak up about it, because if I can plant a seed or one or two people, it does eventually, resonate and sprout, and they can gain their freedom back, and so be it. I'm a big believer in a creator that I choose to still call God. There's nothing, so many people think when you fall away from your religion that you go, atheist or whatever. Some people do, but that's their choice. We
Right.
need to stop judging and just focus on, I think, really love and light is what this world needs. And that's what we lack. And that alone, I think love is probably the most powerful thing out there.
Yep. One of the main topics in all my books is something called moral capital. You've heard of, there's such a thing as social capital, there's economic capital, etc. Moral capital has four components: the family, the social community, which is your neighbors and the people you work with, the moral community, which is your religion or religious philosophy, doesn't have to be a religion, and patriotism.
Jeez.
And all four of those are under attack right now in the United States. The family's under attack, the social community is under attack, your religion is under attack, and there's disrespect for the country.
Bingo.
And so patriotism is under attack. And moral capital is the glue that holds a society together, because it's the sense of community. Now, I always laugh to myself because pro football is also a moral community. Because fans are fanatic.
Words in general.
It's a religion for their team, but they don't try to beat up the other fan that's sitting next to him because he's with another team.
Yeah.
So it's a moral community is a social community with a moral aspect to it. It goes deeper. And so you're tighter in your moral community than your social community. You're not just friends. You're more than friends. But those, if you take all four of those away, you had no society. You've destroyed it.
And they're doing a hell of a job. I mean, to me, that you have that moral capital of those four things. You've got a solid country, solid communities everywhere.
Right.
I think that's the foundation. You nailed it. So, wow, that's fantastic. Well, do you have any final words, Michael, to leave our audience with? You provide a lot of information.
I think you wore me out.
I doubt that.
I think I'm good.
Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate this. Your time is very much appreciated. And this, hopefully, this has been a great conversation and a lot of great information that you've been able to provide. And so I really appreciate your time. And I'd love to reconnect with you in a few months. And I'm definitely going to grab a couple of your books and dig into those, because I can tell there's a lot of great information there that'll benefit me. So I'll have all the titles as well as links to your website. Can they be bought on your website, or should I also have?
My website has links to Amazon.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes, you can buy them there.
Perfect. I'll have all that information in the show notes, folks. So if you're listening and can't write something down, don't worry about it. We'll have everything in the show notes. And I'll show people all the information so they can connect with you that way. Well, thanks again. I appreciate you, Mike.
Stay in touch, all right?
Appreciate it. I'd love to. Thanks so much.
Great.
Okay, happy holidays. Take care.
You too.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm here to tell you about my new product from MyPillow. Towels that actually work. Watch this absorbency test. Here's another towel that we randomly went out and bought. Here's one of my towels with the nice design. I don't know if you can see this, but you could line a swimming pool with this. This is crazy. Get rid of it. Towels that actually work.
The new MyPillow towels are exclusively made with 100% USA combed cotton with proprietary technology and with maximum absorbency. They dry you faster and are guaranteed to work.
I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow. And to thank you for all your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. Go to MyPillow.com to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. For example, you get my dog beds for as low as $19.99, or for a limited time, you can get my 6-piece towel sets, regularly $109.99, now only $39.99. The lowest price ever with your promo code.